We're going to spend a few minutes today discussing the Deltapine Class of 21 cotton variety lineup. On the agenda for today, we're going to talk about our current commercial products. We're going to talk about the new varieties that we're bringing forth here in 21, and we're also going to take a look into the future at the tail end of the presentation. There's not a single variety that we can plant on every acre in Georgia, Florida, or Alabama. I know that that's every grower's wish and desire, but we all know that just isn't going to happen. So we feel like we have a Deltapine variety that will fit any acre that the grower may have on his farm, stretching from Deltapine 2012 B3XF to Deltapine 1646 B2XF to Deltapine 1840 B3XF, Deltapine 2038 B3XF, Deltapine 2055 B3XF, and Deltapine 2020 B3XF. When you look at that core set of varieties, you can go from a short season dry land situation all the way through a full season irrigated or dry land situation. And we can place a variety on every single acre. We're going to spend a few minutes talking through that, talking a little bit about the placement of each one of these varieties, and hopefully answer a few questions that you may have. You see right here in this chart that we have many different yield environments that we face, and we kind of group these varieties together for each environment. And if you need us to provide you a copy of this chart, we can certainly do so. But you see over on the left, if you're in a less than 1,000-pound yield environment, and that's not always a dry land environment. Some of us have growers that have limited irrigation, or maybe they have big pivots on deep sands, and it's hard for them to get over 1,000 pounds. Well, they may go and look at yield data and say, well, 2038 was the highest yielding variety Deltapine has, and that's what I want to plant, when actually they should be planting a variety like 1840. So when you're getting in those environments, get with your local Deltapine rep, and we can help place a little more specific than I'm going to spend time on today. But 1840 would be a really good option for you on a tough acre. 2141 is a new nematode variety, would also work really well on a tough acre. And then as you move up in the yield environments, you start to pick up varieties like 2038 or 2055 or 1646 that tend to perform at a higher level when you get them up into an environment where you have maybe plenty of water, or it's a good heavy land situation where cotton normally does really well for that grower. You may call it dry land, but he may get enough rain where it's like irrigated soil somewhere else. The first variety I'm going to spend a little bit of time on is DP 2012 B3XF. And in the past, we've not planted a whole lot of early maturing varieties, especially in our southern geographies, because we say we're a full season market. And, I would go along with that for the most part. But now we've started to bring some new genetics forward that perform both quality and yield with some of our full season varieties that we've been planting, like 1646. DP 2012 has been a phenomenal variety in the southwest corner of the state behind sweet corn or behind produce. It's a smooth leaf variety, so when you're planting late, we know whiteflies can be an issue. This helps make it not as attractive to the whiteflies. It's bacterial blight resistant, which is also another plus for this variety. It does like to be irrigated, or it likes to be in a higher yield environment. So I would say if you got a grower who's looking for a good short season variety with really good quality, similar yield to 1646, 2012 would be his option. And when I say good dirt, I mean good heavy dirt, high water holding capacity, or plenty of water. This one doesn't like stress quite as much as the next one I will discuss. DP 2020 B3XF is the companion variety to 2012 that I previously mentioned. So 2020 seems to take stress a little bit better than 2012. So if you have a guy who is going to be planting maybe some dry land wheat, or he's gets late planting cotton, or maybe he's going to put some grazing in and he wants something he can put in early and get out quickly, 2020 would be a really good option for him. It is bacterial blight resistant. It does have a broad fit, but I would say if the guy's in an area where they have heavy whitefly pressure, this one is semi-smooth. So it does have a little bit of leaf hair, so just know that's a watch out. If the guy is in a situation where whiteflies is his major concern, then revert back to 2012. The next variety we're going to discuss is Deltapine 2038 B3XF, and we all probably got a little bit of experience with that one this year, and quite honestly, the way our weather lined up for us, we didn't get to see the full potential of this particular variety. This one is a incredibly high yielding variety, and if you saw any turnouts, has an extremely high turnout. It's about a base grade, I would say, as far as quality goes. It's not horrible quality. It's better, much better than 1538. Not quite as good as 1646, so it's kind of in the middle. It doesn't have quite as long a staple as 1646 does. It doesn't like to be on super wide rows. If you got a guy who's wanting to play with like some 40-inch or some 60-inch cotton, and the little bit of that's kind of been talked about or thrown around, this one doesn't fit that acre very well because it's more of a columnar type plant. Think of it more like a Christmas tree. It'll kind of bush out at the bottom, and then it grows basically straight up the stalk up toward the top. So you want to keep those middles clean, but this one you may be able to see a little bit of sunlight down to the ground. As far as yield goes, it's probably the highest yielding variety that we have. Put it on good heavy dirt if you have a guy who's gonna plant it. Put it where you have plenty of water, where you can really push the limits with this one. When it's time to defoliate, you also want to get in there and get these leaves knocked off when it's about, I'd say, 65 to 75% open, because it's kind of an open bowl, and it doesn't weather very well. So when this one gets ready, you want to get out there and you want to get it harvested. Don't let it sit out in the field for a long time. 2055 has gotten a lot of hype this year, and rightly so. So it fits the same acre that 1646 does. You can take 2055 on your tougher dryland acre all the way up through your heavy irrigated acre. It's going to be an aggressive growing variety. You're going to need to manage it with picks pretty heavily. One of the major complaints that we have with 1646 is when it loads up with a heavy bowl load, the stalk tends to bend and it leans over a little bit. And in a year like we had in 2020, where we had so much rain from all the hurricanes, we tended to see a little bit more rot in that one. And growers have started talking about trying to find something that'll fit that same acre that will have the consistency that 1646 had. 2055 fits the bill. Now, one thing I will say about this one is if you don't control it with picks, it'll get big and it'll get rank, and you may see some rot in the bottom. So you want to make sure that if your guy's planting this one on a pretty good piece of dirt where cotton grows well, then he needs to stay on top of it with picks. Hit it with an early shot and don't let it get away from him, because it's hard to catch up after it gets going. This one does not carry the bacterial blight gene, so just know that. I really didn't see much bacterial blight in our area this year. Didn't really see it in 2055, but if that is a grower's concern, then just know that it does not carry the bacterial blight trait. I mentioned our core varieties, and I spent a lot of time on the class of 20. So now we're going to move forward to the class of 21, because we had a couple of spots where we still needed a variety to fit that niche. 2115 is going to be a companion variety to DP 2012 or 2020. So DP 2115 is a Bollgard 3 Extend Flex, just like 2020 and 2012 are. It has a great yield potential. It has really good fiber quality. From what I've seen out of this one, it's very similar to 2012 or 2020. I really don't see anything that jumps out at me that would make me want to plant 2115 over 2012 or 2020. But if you have a grower who's wanting to look at something different, and he plants a lot of acres of short season varieties, or maybe he just is a guy who likes to look at new stuff, 2115 would be a good option for him. This would be one that you could plant early to try to get grazing behind. It's one that you could probably plant late if you wanted to behind produce. Again, I don't know that it's gonna beat 2012 or 2020, but this one seems to be a little more responsive to picks than those two. So maybe if you got a piece of dirt that tends to get away from the grower, he can plant 2115 and he may be able to manage it more timely and keep it in check. Just a good option, something different. The supply is not great of this one, but if you got a guy who's interested, get with your rep, and we'll see if we can find a few bags for him to try. So Deltapine 2127 B3XF is a really exciting new variety for us. Extremely high yield potential. It does have a few watch outs that I would say. One of those would be that 2127, it seems to be a little bit loose in the burr, and you can see right here in this picture how it's kind of stringing out. So what I would say, if you have a grower who really can push yields on his farm, he would love to plant this one and see what he could do. This is the only variety that has run close to the yields or bettered the yields of DP 2038. Fiber quality, very similar to 2038. It has been a solid performer, but it's a solid performer in a better yield environment. It's one that you don't want to put under a whole lot of stress. So we would consider it a racehorse if you had a guy who was trying to kind of see how it would fit. It does carry a pretty good size seed. So, it's going to come up pretty well. It's going to come up well grown. It's going to move. It's a fairly aggressive grower that you're going to have to manage with picks. One really odd thing about 2127 that kind of makes it different than a lot of the varieties that we've been planting, it's a real open canopy. So when you pull a stalk up, it seems like there's not a whole lot of fruit on, but they're so scattered on the plant, all out on the limbs, and the limbs just kind of open out that it will fool you. So this one would be one that's got a really good canopy coverage. If you got a guy who might have a lot of foliar disease issues and he tends to grow a lot of thick rank cotton, this one with its open canopy may allow a little bit more airflow in there, and I would also advise in that situation that he would need to stay on top of it with picks to keep the height down. It is not bacterial blight resistant, so just know that, and if that is an issue, then we might not want to plant it on that farm. But again, if you want to push yield, this is a great variety to do that. You see right here, compared to 1646, 70 observations over the past 3 years, DP 2127 holds about 115-pound yield advantage. And down there at the bottom of this chart, you notice that 2127 versus DP 2038, over 44 observations the last 2 years, holds about an 80-pound advantage over 2038, which is saying a lot because 2038 has been a massive yielder. The next variety we'll discuss is DP 2141 NRB3XF. Note I said earlier that we had a few holes in our lineup, and this is one of those that I think fills the niche that we had been kind of missing. DP 2141 is a new root knot and reniform Bolgar 3 Extend Flex variety. This is something that we have not had in a Deltapine variety. This is the first reniform tolerance that we brought forward, and combining it with the root knot allows this variety to spread from the southern sandy parts of our area all the way up through the heavier red type soils where reniform nematodes seem to be a big issue. It's a bushy plant. It's an aggressive growing plant. It looks good in most environments. It seems to be broadly adapted. When we say it fits best in the east, there was a sister variety of this one that we tested that seemed to do better in Texas, and the 2141 seemed to do better for us over here in the southeast. It seemed to do really well on dry land in those tough environments, and I would say that most of the time, if you're going to have heavy nematode pressure, it's going to be on a tough piece of dry land, or it's going to be on a pivot, and you'll have big old spots out in the field. And where I would say you need to put this variety is don't go out there and put it on a field that's got maybe 4 or 5 or 6% of that total field has hot spots in it. Because if you put a variety like 2141 out there beside a variety like 2055 or 2038 or even 2127, they'll likely beat 2141 probably by 150 or 200 pounds in a high yield environment. But if you go out into a field where your limiting factor is nematodes, if the whole field has high nematode pressure, and if year after year the grower has a hard time getting a stalk out of it, if he just can't make a yield on that field, 2141 will absolutely be the best thing that he can plant in that environment. So make sure that you place this thing in the right spot and don't get it out there with false expectations of what it can do. Now, one thing about 2141 is it is bacterial blight susceptible. It doesn't seem to be hypersensitive like we've seen in some of the other Deltapine root knot varieties, but just know that it does not carry the bacterial blight resistance label. It also runs a little bit up to the higher end of the micronair scale, so just keep that in mind as well. But again, if you got a piece of dirt where you have heavy nematode pressure, I would say this variety would be as good or better than any other root knot reniform variety on the market. To me, it grows very similar to 1840, and in Pix Manage, it would be very similar to what you do with an 1840. One thing you also will see is split terminals. So about 30% or so of the plants, you'll see it split down there at the base, and basically it'll turn into two different plant stalks, if you will. But when we harvested it, when we did boll counts, when we plant mapped it, virtually there's no difference in yield where you have split terminals versus just a normal single terminal stalk. So I wouldn't be concerned with that at all. You may get a call from a grower if he plants it and say, hey, what's going on out here? Just comfort him, tell him it's going to be fine. 2141, definitely worth looking at. You see here the observations of 2141 versus 1646. Over the last 3 years, about 40 observations. 1646 holds about a 14 or 15 pound advantage. That's pretty respectable for a root knot variety, because most of the time your racehorse varieties will hold an advantage. But note that we talked about how 2038 and 2127 have nearly 100 pound or 100 plus pound yield advantage over 1646. So that's why I was saying when you put 2141 beside a racehorse, you might expect those varieties to beat it pretty good. But put it where it needs to go, and it'll be a great performer for you. In summary, 2141 excites me a lot. If you got a grower who has had those acres, he's been wanting to plant a Deltapine variety, he's been wanting to spray dicamba on his crop, 2141 gives him an opportunity to stay with one trait platform, one herbicide platform, and go across all of his acres. What's new? So you've probably read or heard a little bit about Thrive-On technology. So that's the Lygus or thrips trait as it's commonly known in the market. It controls plant bugs and it controls thrips. We got U.S. approval just a couple days ago on January 18th. You may see some, you probably will see some out there in the market this year in plots similar to what we do with our NPE varieties. We're going to be looking at our germplasm. We're going to make sure that when we bring these varieties to the market that the germplasm is every bit as good as the varieties that you've come to plant or what you expect in a Deltapine variety. We're also going to be looking at the trait itself. We want to make sure the trait holds up really well in heavy thrips pressure and heavy plant bug pressure, and make sure that when you plant those, you can have confidence that it's going to do what we say it will do on larger acres. So be on the lookout for Thrive-On. Get with your local rep. We can walk you through some fields. And then the class of 2020, so this will be the class of 21 NP varieties. We're moving forward. We have some exciting varieties in the pipeline that are going to give us a higher yield advantage. They're also going with some more fiber quality gains over what we've been doing. And we have quite a few new root knot reniform offerings that we're going to be looking at. So we'll have more than the one option. And if that one doesn't work for your grower, maybe we can put one on his farm that'll work in any type environment. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your business. Have a good day.
Thank you for watching this video. Now let's move along to the next part of this 5-part video series of our 2021 Florida, Georgia, and Alabama retail training.